I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump plans to sign a 6-month waiver on moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and reportedly told Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas his plans to move the embassy from Tel Aviv. Abbas reportedly warned the president against taking that step. Moving the embassy is said to be a red line for Muslims. The U.S. is ordering personnel and their families not to conduct personal travel in the Jerusalem area. Palestinian groups have threatened widespread protests if President Trump recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital or advances plans to move the U.S. Embassy. A White House announcement could come tomorrow. GOP leaders delayed a House vote for a short-term budget bill to buy more time to settle divisions over spending and avert a government shutdown. Party leaders had planned to vote tomorrow. Federal funding runs out midnight on Friday. The bill would keep agencies open until December 22nd. Native American leaders are suing to block President Trump's decision to cut Utah's Bears Ears National Monument by about 85%. A coalition of 5 tribes argue U.S. presidents can only designate national monuments, not downsize them. Trump also plans to shrink Utah's Grand Staircase Escalante Monument. Global News 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists. This is Bloomberg.
And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Disney takes the lead, emerging as a front-runner to acquire the bulk of 21st Century Fox's media empire. We will analyze the stakes and why Comcast remains in contention. Plus, all bets are on. Early Bitcoin investor Jehan offers his take as the world's biggest exchange operators prepare to begin trading futures of cryptocurrency. And next week's big vote on net neutrality, as Ajit Pai keeps touting a rollback. But first, to our lead. Prominent tech investor Shervin Pishavar, who has been accused of sexual misconduct, said he is taking a leave of absence from his duties at the venture capital firm Sherpa Capital and transportation company Virgin Hyperloop One. 5 women who met Pishavar in a professional context told Bloomberg they were sexually assaulted or harassed by him. Current and former colleagues of a 6th woman, Uber employee Austin Geit, say he groped her at an Uber holiday party. In a statement, Pishavar wrote, "As that legal case progresses, it is my priority to ensure that the Sherpa Capital family is not adversely affected. I am confident that I will be vindicated." For more now, we're joined by Bloomberg's Sarah McBride and Eric Newcomer, who've been covering this story. He's referring there to a rape allegation against him in London. There is some uncertainty surrounding that particular case, but the case of these 6 women and the story that we told is our concern right now. You got new information just as we were sitting down from Hyperloop One about the status there. What can you tell us?
Right. It didn't come from Hyperloop One itself, but I got a copy of Shervin's letter to the members of the board of Virgin Hyperloop One, and he said he's resigning from the board and he's assigning his super voting rights to the brand new co-chairman, a Russian investor called Ziavudin Magomedov, who's going to be taking over all of Shervin's voting rights.
Now, we also have a statement from Sherpa Capital saying, "We recognize the inherent challenges of reporting misconduct, but note that Sherpa has never received a sexual harassment complaint. Nevertheless, we are launching an independent internal review to ensure our practices and operations continue to reflect the highest professional and ethical standards." We should note that he has completely denied these allegations. He is working to find those who are, quote unquote, spreading false rumors about him. Eric, what do you make of his reaction?
It's a definite non-apology at the moment. It's a realization, I would assume, that he needs to distance himself from the companies as they sort this stuff out and step away from his board seats and roles, but he's certainly not taking sort of responsibility for the accusations and calling it a smear campaign. So we don't have sort of a real apology yet, but he's clearly putting some distance between himself and his companies, facing these 5 allegations, 6 accounts, and a real arrest that occurred in London over a rape. He was de-arrested, but there are questions about that as well.
Right. He was never charged, but as you say, he was arrested, and London police have confirmed that to us. Sarah, talk to us about what we've heard from investors in Sherpa Capital. I know you've been making the calls to TPG, to Silicon Valley Bank, and to the LPs who have funded his venture capital firm.
Right. So Silicon Valley Bank had actually been in a joint partnership with Sherpa Capital for something called Sherpa Foundry. And they hadn't commented all weekend, but just today I heard that they had, in fact, been in contact with Shervin Peshawar all weekend about the status of their relationship. And they just told me today that now he's resigned, that they plan to continue that relationship with Sherpa Foundry. Other people seem caught by surprise. As recently as Sunday night, he was saying he did not intend to resign, and this seems a sudden about-face.
And still no comment from TPG, correct?
TPG has been declining to comment, and that's still the case.
Now, we have heard, Shervin Peshawar, a major Democratic donor, has given $500,000 or such to Democratic candidates. Senator Cory Booker, Senator Kamala Harris have donated the funds that he donated to them to charity. We also heard in a statement from Uber that they support those who come forward to discuss sexual harassment. They commend their bravery. And we've learned that Shervin Peshawar is no longer a special advisor to Uber as he was under Travis Kenetic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like Shervin's relationship with Uber was largely through Travis Kalanick, who's close to once he left. Dara, the new CEO, hasn't really relied on him, and I think the company's trying to put some distance between themselves and Shervin, that he's no longer a special advisor. It took the Democratic candidates the weekend, I think, to sort of figure out what they were going to say. But we have those two senators. Cory Booker was hosted at Shervin Peshawar's house, so he was doing a major Democratic fundraiser, major bundler for President Obama's presidential campaign, and donor to the Democratic National Committee. So we have two senators now saying that they're going to return the funds.
A spokesperson for President Obama declined to comment. We haven't heard yet from Hillary's spokesperson, but he also hosted a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
In addition,
lots of pictures
to
of them
Cory
together.
Booker.
Right.
So very strong ties there. All right, I know we're all going to continue to follow this story, so thanks so much for stopping by and sharing the update with us. Sarah McBride and Eric Newcomer of Bloomberg Tech. All right, a major deal in media could come sooner than you think. 21st Century Fox is speaking with Disney and Comcast to sell some of its assets. As CNBC reported, the deal could come as soon as next week. So what is at stake, and could this signal a new era for the media giants? Let's bring in Geetha Ranganathan, who covers media for Bloomberg Intelligence in Princeton, New Jersey. So what is the status, especially with Disney, Geetha?
So it looks like plenty of companies were obviously looking out for these assets from Fox. Comcast, Verizon, Sony, Disney, all of them were reportedly in hunt for these assets. But it looks like Fox might actually favor Disney a little bit, because I think they see a better strategic fit for their assets, and I think they think that it would pass regulatory muster. Comcast has had its own run-ins with the DOJ when it was acquiring Time Warner Cable, and then with the NBC acquisition. So I think they might favor Disney.
So are there any stumbling blocks given the DOJ's recent lawsuit surrounding AT&T and Time Warner?
Yeah, I think everybody, all the investors are going to be watching that lawsuit very, very closely. Obviously, when the Republican Party came to power, everybody kind of thought that, this is a very favorable climate for M&A deals, especially media M&A. But this was kind of totally unexpected. And it shows that no deal is going to be a slam dunk. It's not going to be a walk in the park. So everybody's going to be looking at it very closely.
What would Fox be left with here? Would they still be a viable competitor?
Absolutely, they will be. So Fox has really struggled a little bit over the years with its film and TV studio. Now that's been, it's been a little disappointing part of their business, just because they've not been able to churn out as many hits. It's required a lot of heavy investment, and just because they've had so many aging franchises, they haven't seen that much of success, like Disney, for instance. It's really a part of the business that requires a lot of investment and might actually be better off with Disney. Now Fox is going going to be a much leaner company after the sale, a potential sale. They're going to hone in really more on their news and their sports properties. Now, those are properties that they know really well, and they have a lot of competency and a lot of expertise in those areas.
So what do we know about the timeline here?
I mean, the CNBC report obviously said that it's going to probably come out anytime next week. These talks themselves have been going on possibly for about a month or so, on and off, but it could happen. I think they are really gaining momentum.
All right, Geetha Ranganathan with Bloomberg Intelligence. I know you will keep us updated. Thanks so much. Coming up, an early Bitcoin investor reaping the benefits of this year's rally. How Kenetic Capital is investing in blockchain technologies next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. The worst is behind Snap, and the company will likely get back on track next year. This, according to a Barclays analyst, Ross Sandler. Sandler upgraded the stock for the first time since initiating at equal weight in March. Shares gained during trading, though, remain about 15% below its March IPO price. Sandler also became the first analyst to upgrade Blue Apron after its lackluster post-IPO performance, sending shares up more than 16% on Monday. Now, as we've been reporting, this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern, CBOE Global Markets will finally start trading Bitcoin futures. The CME then debuts contracts on December 18th, and the NASDAQ will offer futures next year. Kenetic Capital Managing Partner Jehan started investing in Bitcoin in 2013 when the digital asset saw its first major rally, and since then, prices have surged significantly, enabling Chu to quit his job as an art advisor in Hong Kong and start a venture capital firm investing in blockchain technologies. He joins us now here in San Francisco, so I'm sure it's been quite a ride for you.
Yeah.
What do you make of the optimism, incredible optimism, and incredible skepticism at the same time?
I think we're just at the beginning. I think the optimism is we're just starting to see what the future really will start to look like with mainstream capital, with institutional finance coming onto the stage. And as far as the skepticism, I think it's a natural reaction to just the unknown and such a surge in interest and capital coming into the space. It's natural, but it will fade as the actual kind of development of the space goes on.
Do you think it's a bubble? Even if it's not a fraud, are we in a bubble?
I think we're along one of the peaks, many peaks and valleys along the way on an onward trajectory up towards a greater and greater future.
So what's your hunch on price targets for next year?
I think that we're going to see 50,000 by the end of 2018 for Bitcoin.
That's strong.
Every month we're revising our targets up. I think that with everything that's coming, with both the kind of 1-2 punch of the CBOE and the CME, I think that the entire world is on watch now for what is to come and what the real kind of liquidity that can enter this market will actually look like.
Now, you're based in Hong Kong. What is the difference between how cryptocurrencies are perceived in Asia versus the U.S.?
I have a feeling that Asia is actually a lot more nimble than the U.S.
China aside.
Well, to be fair, China, despite the China ban and despite the crackdown on ICOs and the crackdown on cryptocurrency exchange, remains incredibly, incredibly open to blockchain technology. And low-key, China is actually one of the fastest growing and really the fastest to adopt at an enterprise net level blockchain technology. I also think that the types of signals that the PBOC has been giving as far as developing their own cryptocurrency, even as a proof of concept, lends a lot of weight to the validity of digital currency at a sovereign level generally. I think that in 2018 we will see the first state-backed digital currency in one form or another, and I bet you it will come from Asia.
Interestingly, Japan is actually the friendliest regulatory environment towards cryptocurrencies, followed by South Korea. Do you think that has anything to do with the possibility of North Korea using Bitcoin and Ethereum as a safe haven?
I think that South Korea is really interested in cryptocurrency because they have a culture of trading. They're very familiar with trading Forex, they're very familiar with trading stocks, and I think that cryptocurrency comes very naturally. I'm not sure it has a lot to do with the politics between North and South, but I do think that anywhere you see a population which is comfortable trading, like Japan, like Korea, and even Hong Kong to a degree, and especially recreationally in China, you're going to see a lot of interest in cryptocurrency, and I just see that growing exponentially.
So what are the other cryptocurrencies that you're watching?
Well, of course, I watch a lot of the Big Ten, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ripple, Ether, but I'm also interested in the kind of bloom of additional utility coins that are coming. I specialize in ICOs and a lot of the applications that are coming out of this space. One of our projects is called BlueZell, which is a decentralized database application. Think of it as like the Oracle for blockchain, as well as a company which just launched from former founder of Fab.com, Jason Goldberg, called Simple Token, which is a coin for e-commerce. Now, while we tend to focus on these large cap cryptos, I think that the world should really be thinking about what is the long tail of software on the back of cryptocurrencies and tokens look like. And we really start to see this from companies like Simple Token and BlueZell.
What kind of regulation do you think is coming for cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in the United States?
I think that the SEC is really on watch. I think that there have been a few warning shots that have been fired. We just recently saw that the SEC has pursued prosecution against yet another ICO, which was just really, I think, their way of showing that they're serious. I think that 2018, they're really under pressure to show significant regulation in place and a real framework for how they begin to kind of approach it. And I think that's 2018. I think the rest of the world will follow. There are many jurisdictions which look to the SEC for guidance, and once the SEC really shows how they plan to deal with cryptocurrencies long term, then we'll start to see what is regulatory certainty globally, and I think that is when the real money starts to come in.
So if Bitcoin hits 50,000 as you expect it to by the end of next year, what about Ethereum?
Ethereum, I think, will I would hope that Ethereum would hit around 5,000 by next year. I think that's a relatively aggressive and ambitious target. But when I think about the possibility of Ethereum, it's really much greater than Bitcoin itself. Ethereum is, at its root, a utility token. It's an application framework. And the ways that you can use Ethereum far outstrip what Bitcoin can be used for, although Bitcoin has incredible utility as a store of value and a unit of transfer.
All right. Jehan, we'll have to have you back at the end of 2018 to see if you were right. Kenetic Capital Managing Partner, thanks so much for stopping by. Coming up, Tesla continues to struggle to meet its production demands, but could it get the right charge from another Elon Musk venture? That's next. This is Bloomberg. Lyft has announced its most recent funding round has increased by 50%. That brings the total raised to $1.5 billion. The ride-hailing startup is now valued at $11.5 billion. This round was led by Alphabet. Also investing is Uber backer Fidelity Investments. Lyft has gained significant U.S. market share this year as its main rival, Uber, faces a string of scandals and legal battles. Elon Musk's Tesla is known for its grandiose plans, a high-speed all-electric roadster, a semi-truck that goes 300 to 500 miles on a single charge, but it's also known for continued production problems and cash burn. So just how can Tesla be put back on track? Well, the answer could lie with another Musk-led company, SpaceX. At least that's what one Morgan Stanley analyst believes. Bloomberg's Dana Hull has all the details. She covers all things Tesla and SpaceX for us. So what is this Morgan Stanley analyst saying, and where is it coming from?
Well, it's largely coming from Adam Jonas's imagination. He has been asking Elon on earnings calls for several quarters now if there's ever a chance of Tesla and SpaceX combining. And Elon has always said, no, these are very different companies. They have very different product portfolios, but there is some overlap in the companies in terms of what they're doing. They share technology in terms of material science. The VP of material science at Tesla is also the VP of material science at SpaceX. So You could imagine a scenario where perhaps one day they would merge. But to be clear, I mean, this is sort of Adam's speculation. There's no evidence that this is underway.
Right. Has Elon Musk or Tesla commented on this at all?
No, they did not comment today. I asked them for comment. And, you know, Elon has been pretty clear that they're very different companies. Tesla makes consumer products, you know, SpaceX flies rockets and wants to inhabit Mars. I mean, they don't have a natural overlap, but they're both very disruptive companies, and you know they could maybe share data or AI at some point. And you know, when you work for Tesla or SpaceX, you really are working for Elon, so he tends to kind of borrow people as he needs them. But it's hard to imagine a scenario where they would actually merge.
Is Tesla in such dire straits that such a deal could be helpful?
That's really hard to say. I mean, I think until Tesla gets the Model 3 production issues finished, I don't see them being acquired by anybody. And I don't know what SpaceX would gain by having Tesla. SpaceX is doing gangbusters on its own. I don't know if they would want to be associated with a Tesla.
So, you know, the other indication from this analyst is that his attention, Elon Musk's attention, may wander to his, you know, conquering the universe, getting to Mars and all of that. Do you think that that is in fact a risk?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about Adam's note was that there is a key man risk with Tesla, and Tesla does not have a COO. It has never had a COO, and what this succession plan is not something that the company has been transparent about.
Haven't we reported that he's tried for a while to find a COO, but
there have been rumors about
happened.
There have been rumors about COOs in the past. There's not like an active search that we know of. There's speculation that John McNeil internally is being groomed to be a successor because he's the president of sales and service. Everyone else is a VP. But you know, what is the plan? I mean, Elon has always sort of said that he could see stepping down from Tesla once the Model 3 is up and running, and it's not really clear who would really run the show over there if he ever did that.
Has he ever said that about SpaceX?
No. SpaceX is the company that he founded in 2002 with his money from PayPal. SpaceX is his first love. I think he will be at SpaceX to the bitter end.
So SpaceX is his baby. So what will you be following, especially as it comes to whether or not they can resolve these production issues in short order?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be looking for, you know, early January when SpaceX releases its sales and production figures. I'd love to know if there's an active COO search. I don't think there is right now. I'm sure Adam will ask these questions on the next earnings call. And I think that both companies are going to have a very robust, very busy year coming up. So I don't see a merger happening anytime soon.
Okay. Jenna Hull, who covers Tesla and SpaceX for us, thank you, as always,
pleasure.
for stopping by. Coming up, more news on the scope of Russia's influence on U.S. social platforms, how the Kremlin tried to pose as local American news sites on Twitter. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. House Speaker Paul Ryan says the tax bill passed by the Senate is, quote, monumental reform. Ryan praised the progress of the legislation at a leadership conference today.
Last night, we passed the motion to go to conference to reconcile these two good bills. The conferees, led by our faithful leader, Chairman Kevin Brady, have a lot of work to do, but they're going to get this done. They're going to make this legislation the best it can be. They're going to make it better than what we've already seen.
Congressional leaders meet with President Trump now on Thursday, and the Senate voted to confirm Kirstjen Nielsen as Secretary of Homeland Security. She replaces John Kelly, who became White House Chief of Staff in July. She previously served as Kelly's Chief of Staff. Democratic Unionist Party leader Arlene Foster said the Irish government would not allow British Brexit negotiators to release the text of an agreement over Ireland's border. The deal, which reportedly gave Northern Ireland a special status distinct from the mainland Britain, was blocked at the last minute. It collapsed after the DUP, which keeps May's government in power, refused to back it. The Emir of Kuwait abruptly ended a two-day meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council just hours after it started. The decision came after the UAE announced a new partnership with Saudi Arabia, separate from the GCC. Today's development puts pressure on the GCC, whose member states, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, are all U.S. allies. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in Washington, 6:30 Wednesday morning now in Hong Kong. We are joined by Bloomberg's Sophie Kamarudin with a look at the markets. Sophie, good morning to you.
Good morning, Elisa. Now with Dr. Copper out sick, leading that tumble in base metals, we are closely watching industrial and mining shares in Asia. And the Aussie dollar melted with metals easing its gains, while Sydney futures are signaling a lower start ahead of Australia's third quarter GDP figures. Now, the dollar's recent advance, that has compounded copper's woes, rising in the New York session with two-year yields as traders price in more rate hikes in 2018, seeing gold bulls beat a retreat. Gold just holding losses there, and the yen continues to consolidate. Japanese futures pointing lower. In Hong Kong, I'm Sophie Kamarudin. Up next, more with Bloomberg Technology.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. More damning news has surfaced on the extent of Russian interference on U.S. social platforms. The Russian Internet Research Agency, backed by the Kremlin, tried to pose as American news sites on Twitter. The agency operated dozens of Twitter accounts that collectively garnered more than 500,000 followers. Joining us now with the details, Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang. So, Selena, what do we know about how these accounts operated and what kind of so-called news they tried to spread?
Now, these Russian-linked accounts were surprisingly convincing in the way that they tried to pose as American local news site. They collectively garnered more than 500,000 followers. They targeted a broad swath of communities from Chicago to Los Angeles to San Francisco. And in the descriptions under the handles, their bios read things like, "Follow us for local original reporting for breaking news." They even said messages like, "Direct message us 24/7 for any tips," or feedback. Now, it's interesting the approach that these accounts took. Many of them were trying to sow discord across the American population, trying to put left-leaning people more on the left side, right-leaning people even more towards the right, and create divisions across society. Now, some of these other accounts clearly were trying to ingratiate themselves within a particular community to be regarded as the trusted local news source. It was also interesting that many of these accounts were actually created several years before the 2016 U.S. elections and were again used during the French elections to sow more discord and promote propaganda.
So why did it take so long for Twitter to discover this?
That's a great point. They've been berated by Congress and their own users for taking an incredibly long time to finally understand just the extent of manipulation on the platform. But in response to this story, Twitter did tell me that they did not verify any of these thousands of Internet Research Agency linked accounts, and that they've now suspended them. Now, on top of that, Twitter says now that they're taking this problem very seriously. They're dedicating a lot of engineering resources to it, and that they've added an additional statement that they agree that this sort of activity is intolerable and they need to do better to combat this. Part of that means that they need to update their algorithms to be able to catch malicious bots before they even log in and to make sure that they aren't able to spread their messages. But a lot of experts are less than impressed, and there are still many bots that are rampant on the platform and a lot more work to be done on their part.
Indeed. All right, Bloomberg Tech, Selena Wang, thanks so much for bringing us that story. A reminder, Bloomberg LP is in a partnership with Twitter to produce a global breaking news video network. Well, from fake news and Russian interference to net neutrality, there are a lot of big issues impacting tech companies. Michael Beckerman is president and CEO of the Internet Association, which represents all of the major players in tech, including Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And I know, Michael, he's here with us in the studio. You've been following the hearings in Washington, the tech companies testifying before Congress. We just had this story about Twitter, more bad news. You know, What is the responsibility of these companies when it comes to these issues, and why did it take so long for them to realize this?
I mean, first of all, it is an incredibly serious issue, and it's one that the companies are addressing and have come forward to address. But really what we're talking about is foreign espionage, and it's incumbent on all of us to work together to make sure that foreign actors are not able to influence elections or meddle in our political system. And it's something that our companies are working on, but it's not a simple issue. You also have free speech, and be able to figure out what is fake and what is real is not always that simple.
You know, there were suspicions of this, more than a year ago, and we saw Mark Zuckerberg the day after the election say that it was crazy to think that fake news could have swayed the election, or that it was a huge problem. He has since apologized, but really it makes you wonder, why it took so long for these companies to take a harder look at themselves.
Well, we're certainly doing it now. I think it's clear that companies are taking it seriously and are putting pieces in place to make sure this does not happen again.
What about when it comes to terrorist content? We know that these companies are taking additional steps to handle terrorist content online. They are joining together in order to battle terrorist content, and yet this is another huge problem on these platforms.
It's another issue. Again, the companies are working together very closely to identify and remove content, often even before it comes up. But again, it's another gray area between, you could take a video that maybe is being played on Bloomberg, but also being used by a terrorist organization to recruit. To be able to determine the difference between the two is not always that simple, but it's one that our companies are working on every single day, dedicating engineers and a lot of time.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the FCC being poised to roll back net neutrality protections. We heard from Tom Wheeler, former chair of the FCC, joined us on our show. Take a listen to what he had to say.
What we're seeing here is the cableization of the internet. If you like your cable company and the way in which they choose which channels you can see and the way in which they continue increasing their prices, you're going to love what happens under this repeal, because suddenly the people making the rules are the networks.
Now, we also have this statement from Ajit Pai, the chair of the FCC now, who says they might cloak their advocacy in the public interest, but the real interest of these internet giants is in using the regulatory process to cement their dominance in the internet economy. When it comes to a free and open internet, Twitter is part of the problem. The company has a viewpoint and uses that viewpoint to discriminate. What's your response?
Well, I think Chairman Wheeler said it perfectly, and I strongly disagree with Chairman Pai. This is about individuals. This is not, he's being very political here, trying to deflect attention to Twitter and internet companies, but this is about individuals. This is about people who are trying to access the internet, and the reason that we have these rules is that there's not competition or choice in the broadband market. And Tom Wheeler is right, that without these rules, you're going to be looking at a cable TV model to the internet, which I think is bad for the economy and bad for individuals, and certainly bad for startups and the future of our economy as it relates to these digital internet platforms. The rules should not be revoked.
By all accounts, the rules will be revoked.
Yeah.
So then what happens? What will the consequences be?
Well, I mean, this is not the end. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about this for many years. It's like Groundhog's Day, on this issue. It's not over yet. I mean, this is something that it's an incredibly important issue. It will certainly go to the courts. I don't want to tip our hand or anything on legal strategy, but it's questionable the Pai's ability to roll these back in this way, because nothing has changed in a negative sense since the 2015 rules were put in effect that Chairman Wheeler did, and these rules rolling in the back will hurt consumers and will hurt our economy.
Now, we know that Silicon Valley and President Trump didn't get off on the best foot. In fact, many people in Silicon Valley, very powerful people, came out against Donald Trump and supported Hillary Clinton. There's now since been lots of distraction, lots of things happening within the administration and in Washington. Has the relationship between Silicon Valley and the White House gotten better or worse? Has there been any change?
Well, you have to, with any administration, have to take it issue by issue, right? And so even if you look back to the Obama administration, there are many issues where there was agreement between Silicon Valley. There were areas where we disagreed. When we disagreed, we were very vocal in the disagreement, but then when we were in agreement, obviously we did. And the same thing with the Trump administration. when our companies and industries disagree with the president. We've been vocal in that, but we're also working very closely with the administration on important initiatives that are good for our industry and our society at large. We worked very closely with the administration and Ivanka Trump on an initiative to bring computer science funding to K-12 schools. That was something where there's no disagreement and there's no reason we should not be working closely for what's best for our country.
But what about the issues that
then we'll
they
disagree,
right? Like
so
whether it's immigration or trade or many issues.
That's fine, and we can disagree on the issues we disagree on and do so constructively and respectively and find ways to work together, which we have. Trade is an issue that we are working closely with the administration, and we do think we can make progress on updates to NAFTA that would be good for the digital economy. But you have to take every issue individually, just like we did under Obama. We'll do the same thing under Trump, and that's just the way it goes.
All right, Michael Beckerman of the Internet Association. Always great to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Good to be
Thanks
here.
so much for the relationship status update. Appreciate it. Well, Google is ramping up for a hiring spree. The company is recruiting thousands of reviewers to reduce the number of inappropriate videos on YouTube. It is also introducing tougher restrictions on advertising and making greater use of smart technology. And by 2018, Google aims to have more than 10,000 people to review questionable videos on the platform. The announcement comes as YouTube looks to bounce back from a string of embarrassing incidents of questionable content that's been discovered on its site. Coming up, industrial drone startups aim for new heights. We will speak to the CEO of Kespry about its latest funding round. This is Bloomberg. The industrial drone startup Kespry just closed its Series C funding round. The company raised $33 million, bringing the total to over $61 million. The investment was led by G2VP. It also included some strategic investors with Shell Technology and Cisco Ventures. Shell comes on board as Kespry tries to expand its market into gas and oil. Joining us now, Kespry CEO George Mathew. So I'm very curious about this Shell relationship, and would you be partnering with them? Will they be using your technology?
Hey, Emily, great to be back on air. Great to see you. So we're really excited with a number of the strategic investors that joined into this round, our Series C. In Shell in specific, they're a customer of Kespry's today, and they're actually using Kespry for better asset management. So not only are they a customer, but an investor in our future.
What do you mean better asset management?
So when you think about asset management in that market, there's a lot of write-offs that occur because you just don't know where the inventory of spare parts and materials are. We're actually now flying a drone overhead to understand where materials are moving within a stockyard and be able to track that effectively, initially with computer vision and then moving towards RFID. And so that better asset management solution is being delivered by Kespry as a solution provider for not only the drone, but the entire analytical application.
What is the bigger potential for drones in the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, when you think about all of these industrial markets today, these are big market opportunities. We started in the mining aggregate space where we now have over 150 customers. We've expanded into the architecture, engineering, construction market, and then more recently, of course, into the insurance inspection space. So when you think about the mining space and the aggregates market and the additional industrial use cases, energy is just a natural next step for us. And so oil and gas has potential for as big of a market as the spaces that we're in today to really take Kespry into new heights.
What about Cisco? I've spoken with the CEO of Cisco, Chuck Robbins, about potential in IoT and the big push that they're making there. What sort of partnership do you see with Cisco?
I think you hit the nail on the head. When Cisco's looking at the future of IoT, drones are the new sensor network. They're delivering all kinds of new information on a new platform where you can collect industrial sources of content and process that in an effective way. Cisco saw that opportunity in terms of what Kespry was delivering into market and became a natural investor into this current round.
There's still a lot of regulatory uncertainty here. What are your biggest concerns?
The regulatory landscape is very much fluid at this point. We think about, in fact, even just visiting the Trump administration earlier this year, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to open up the airspace itself. So today we have a clear regulatory framework that's in place. We can fly a commercial drone below 400 feet of airspace. basically within visual line of sight as long as you have a Part 107 license. So with that regulatory framework being in place as of 2016, it really opened up the commercial use cases and specifically going after some of this industrial work.
5 years from now, when we look up at the sky in California, are we going to see multiple drones?
I have no doubt about that. In fact, some of the regulatory work that's actually happening is to deconflict the airspace, to self-identify who the good actors are, where drones are being used for this kind of commercial work. So we're definitely going to see more drones, both consumer and commercial, in the airspace.
But how would they control volume and traffic?
Well, that's exactly one piece of the overall framework that's in place. It's an unmanned traffic management system that's actually going into place, that's being led by the FAA, where we can now identify who's in the airspace and deconflict so that drones aren't running into each other.
And how do you see the regulations around commercial drones versus personal drones playing out?
Yeah, for commercial drones right now, we have enough of a regulatory framework to do business. So we're flying over mine sites, we're flying over construction locations, we're flying over rooftops to be able to assess what the damage looks like after one of the superstorms. So when you look at the industrial aspects of the commercial space, I think the regulatory framework is very much suited for this kind of work to get accomplished.
All right, George Mathew, CEO of Kespry. Great to have you back on the show, George.
Emily, thanks for having me again.
Thanks so much. Coming up, Talk Tech on display at the World Internet Conference in China. But can U.S. execs break through the Great Firewall? That's next. This is Bloomberg. A European Union court has sided with Apple in a trademark dispute with Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi. Judges ruled that Xiaomi's Mi Pad could easily be confused with the U.S. tech giant's iPad. Xiaomi applied to get the EU trademark in 2014. It can appeal this decision one final time in the EU's top court. Well, the fourth World Internet Conference is underway in Wuzhen, China, and the guest list features some prominent U.S. tech execs, including Apple's Tim Cook and Google's Sundar Pichai. Cook used his platform to tout the virtues of Apple's push into augmented reality.
We believe AR will amplify human performance and deliver breakthroughs that reshape our lives in education, in healthcare and accessibility, and countless other areas. That's why we created the world's largest augmented reality platform this year. We are enabling developers everywhere to create AR experiences that benefit mankind.
Joining us now from Tokyo, Bloomberg Tech's Peter Elstrom. And interesting, Peter, seeing both the CEO of Apple and Google speaking in China, where Google is blocked. Google is not operate in the country. Facebook is blocked. Twitter is blocked. What do you make of the remarks that they had for the Chinese crowd?
Well, this conference is interesting. The Wuzhen conference started in 2014. It takes place southwest of Shanghai in a little canal town. And it was called the World Internet Conference, but it didn't get the kind of tech luminaries that you would see in other places. And yeah, this year was different. It was not just the appearances of the CEOs of Apple and Google, but also the Chinese companies and the Chinese government seemed to exude more confidence than ever before. Alibaba and Tencent, both of their chiefs were in attendance. They are now among the 10 most valuable companies in the world. Jack Ma had some choice words for the people in attendance, including the Western companies. And the Chinese government officials were talking about their approach to the internet and how they see not just the censorship that has drawn so much criticism in China, but also their approach to security as one that could be embraced globally. They talked about beginning initiatives where they could combat terrorism, criminals, and put together some kind of global task force in order to take on some of these issues. So they're certainly exuding a lot of confidence from this conference, which we really hadn't seen before.
Jack Ma of Alibaba also spoke at this conference. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The first technological revolution brought about the First World War, and the second technological revolution led to the Second World War. So the third technological revolution means the Third World War may be in store, but it will not be a war where countries fight with one another, but a war to fight against disease, poverty, and climate change through our joint efforts.
What do you make of Jack Ma's remarks there?
Well, those were certainly interesting. He also had some choice remarks when he was asked about censorship within China, as you mentioned, having Facebook, Twitter, and some other services blocked. And he was very forceful in defending the government's approach. He said that, look, companies that come into the Chinese market need to follow the rules. He made the case that the Chinese market is actually open, something that certainly some companies would contend with. But he said you need to follow the rules when you come here. The implication is that if you're going to come into the Chinese market, then you need to follow the rules of censorship. And Chinese companies typically have censors in-house to back up the government censors to block sensitive content. So he made a pretty forceful case on that front, and he chastised some of the Western companies that have come in temporarily and not really made strong commitments to the market over the long term. One of those companies, of course, is Google, which has tried to move into the market, has some services available, but not the core search business.
So do we expect, and quickly, Peter, any change in the Chinese government stance in the near future?
It was interesting. The big conference rooms at this conference were taken by the government officials who were laying out the government line. They are certainly sticking with this, and the implication comes at a time when the U.S. is wrestling with fake news on Facebook and Twitter, allegations about Russians hacking an election, and they feel like this Chinese approach has some merit, so they were making that case.
Okay. Peter Elstrom for us there in Tokyo. Peter, as always, thanks so much for joining us on the show. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We will see you tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.